Hi, everyone. I'm Steven Sigman,
And I'm Mike Messinio.
and this is the weekly movie throwdown, where each week we look at two films that have something in common and talk through which one is better. This week, since it's Oscar time, we thought we'd go back and do a Best Picture throwdown and possibly rewrite a little history here. We're going to look at, from 1964, the Best Picture winner, My Fair Lady, and it's going to go up against another nominee, Mary Poppins. Which one will win? We shall see. Before we do, Mike, do you have any wins of the week you want to give us?
Do have one win of the week. Well, I went to go see The Bride, by the way, which isn't my win of the week. That movie was completely nuts. And I don't know if it was nuts in a good way or a bad way. I really don't.
In the
But
middle.
it was something.
Yeah.
But I definitely don't think it was a win of the week. But it was something. My win of the week, though, is a show I found on Netflix called How to Get to Heaven from Belfast, which is, I don't know if anybody even knows what it is. It's on Netflix somewhere. But it's an Irish show, and it revolves around these girls these women who are trying to basically solve a murder, or it's like a mystery that took place from it's connected to when they were kids in school. Long story short, it's just a really fun kind of murder mystery-ish Irish show that's really funny. It reminds me a lot of Bad Sisters, that show that was on Apple TV, that was also wonderful. So we're kind of reaching like peak fun mystery shows that involve Irish women. Like those two shows are like two of my favorite shows of the past couple of years. So yeah, How to Get to Heaven from Belfast is really entertaining. I think it's a good time.
Is that filmed in Ireland? I wonder if there's some kind of like tax incentive that Ireland has for filming stuff.
I don't know. I have no idea, but yeah, a lot of these two particular shows are really fun coming out of Ireland. So
Cool.
I think I probably
I'll
like
have to
both
look
of them better than I like the Banshees of Inisherin, but we won't get into that.
Ooh,
Yeah.
I kind of love that movie.
Then you like this
Okay.
show. I think it was good.
All right. Any severed fingers to speak of?
No. Now that
Okay.
no, there's no severed fingers.
Gotcha. Okay. So my win of the week is a double feature recommendation. I saw both of these films independently, but in thinking about them, they kind of really go together well. So the first one is streaming on Shudder right now, and it's called Monolith. It's from 2022. First-time director Matt Vesely. And it stars Lily Sullivan, who is an Australian actor. She was most recently in Evil Dead Rise and a remake of Picnic at Hanging Rock. So very Australian. And she stars as this disgraced journalist who didn't fully vet a source, and it kind of came back to bite her. And so she's out of the game now and trying to get back in. And as you do, she decides to start a podcast about weird stuff. So she gets this podcast set up and immediately gets an anonymous email that is sort of mysterious and kind of leads her down this rabbit hole to this story about these black bricks that at first it's one black brick that kind of shows up. And the more she pulls at the thread, like, and the deeper she gets into it, it becomes more of a bigger story and gets kind of personal for her too. I'm not going to give too much of it away, but it's really kind of fun. I've seen it a few times now, and I really like her, and I really like both of the films I'm going to talk about have one person on screen the entire time, and all of the dialogue is done through phone calls or various other audio formats. So I really recommend that one. The other one just hit theaters. It's from A24. It's a horror movie called Undertone, and it's sort of the same premise in that it's the story of a young woman who's basically giving end-of-life care to her mother. Her name's Evie, and she also hosts a podcast about weird things and gets a mysterious email that includes these 10 audio files. So she and her producer play these audio files over the course of a few episodes, and on the audio files is basically like a Paranormal Activity kind of thing where you're hearing sort of documentation of something going on. It feels like you're watching a home movie, but you're listening to it. And as they go through these files, a lot of the things that are happening in them kind of start happening to Evie in her home. So it really goes down that realm of like blending what she's hearing and it manifesting. Also just her on screen, except for her comatose mother. But really both of these are like one woman on screen really carrying the film. So they're very interesting. And I highly recommend seeing Undertone in a theater because it's very sound designed. And if you have a good sound system in a theater, it's kind of like audio horror. So that plays a big part in it. A little bit of a problem in my screening because there's a lot of silence in it. And what was playing next door was that Baz Luhrmann Elvis documentary. So in between like the terror and the audio of this film, I'm hearing like Polk Salad Annie coming through, and it's kind of frustrating. But that aside, it was really fun to hear this in the theater. So uh, yeah, maybe these two would be a fun throwdown for Halloween or something because they're very similar and both very interesting, I thought.
Cool. You know, I'm always looking for horror movie recommendations because I do not go out of my way to find them. So
Monolith is good because it's more sci-fi and it's kind of like low-key sci-fi, which is what I like. There aren't lasers or aliens or anything. It's just this kind of weird thing shows up. So it's very subtle with the sci-fi element of it. We're going to get into our films, the throwdown this week, but before we do, we're recording this on Oscar Day, and people are going to hear it post Oscars because it drops on Tuesday. So why don't we just give our picks for the above the line nominees and see if we're right in retrospect once this is
pressure's
released.
on. All right.
Yeah. So just really quickly, I'll throw the category at you. You can just tell me who your pick is. Best supporting actress.
Well, you tell me yours first.
Okay, for me, this is kind of a toss up, but I'm going Amy Madigan for Weapons because Aunt Gladys is legendary.
Yeah, would like Amy Madigan to win, but I actually think Tiana Taylor's going to win.
I like hearing that. Okay, best supporting actor. I'm going Sean Penn on this. It feels like a lock to me.
Okay, I'm going to be contrary. I'm going Stellan Skarsgård.
Okay,
Just because I enjoy saying Stellan Skarsgård, so I'm going with him.
He won the Golden Globe for best supporting actor. Sean Penn won the SAG award, the actor, and Sean Penn has kind of been locking in some things since they won the BAFTA, I think. So that's kind of why I think he's going to win. All right, best actress.
Yeah, this is the only one I think is 100% lock.
Yeah.
So Jessie Buckley.
Although I was reminded recently that Eddie Murphy was on the road to an Oscar for Dreamgirls, and then Norbit was released during the voting, and it completely tanked him. So is The Bride going to be her Norbit?
But I don't think The Bride is Norbit in any way. I mean, even regardless of what you think of The Bride, she is mesmerizing in it. I actually think she's the best thing in it. So in my mind, I think it elevates her standing because I'm not sure how watchable The Bride is without Jessie Buckley being at the center of it. So I think it only reinforces her Oscar campaign.
Okay, that's a fair take. I like it.
I mean, I think Rose Byrne is the sleeper in this category, even though I think Kate Hudson in Song Song Blue is really wonderful. I think it's almost like you reassess Kate Hudson after seeing Song Song Blue, I think she's really great in that movie. And Rose Byrne is probably the sentimental favorite or the sleeper if anybody can win, but I don't think it's going to happen.
This is where I take a moment to point out that Kate Hudson, industry darling with a long lineage of Hollywood people in her family, basically stole a nomination from Amanda Seyfried for The Testament of Anne Lee, and we're not happy about that.
Yeah, that's fair.
All right, actor in a leading role.
Ooh, this is the tough one, isn't it?
What do you think?
I think that the tides have shifted. I think Michael B. Jordan's going to win this award.
I agree. There's been a lot of controversy around Chalamet.
Which, by the way, I don't want to get into all this, which is stupid. I think all the controversy around Chalamet is stupid, to be perfectly honest about it. And I think anyone slamming his comments and everything is just, we just live in a world where we need to be angry and create controversy, and I totally reject that. I think it's also the reason that actors, I think that famous people no longer give interviews or say anything honest because it creates this kind of stuff. And I think it's a shame. Like, you should be able to be off the cuff and say something kind of silly, and the way that he said it kind of shows you that he's just kind of speaking off the cuff in a way that I'm not even sure how seriously he's taking it. We won't get into the whole thing about it, but either way, the whole thing just made me angry. And the people coming out and being so angry about it probably never gone to see an opera in their lives.
Well, you're clearly not on social media because a lot of opera companies and ballet companies are really coming out in force to
I'm not. Here's the
defend
thing, though.
themselves.
As someone who actually has seen both, I've seen opera and I've seen ballet, and I watched the show on Amazon that Amy Sherman Palladino made about ballet. And that whole show was about how much trouble ballet companies are in. And these are people who love ballet. So who are we kidding here? I mean, but it's being able, saying that the two things are struggling and is not saying that they're bad art forms in any way, shape, or form. But regardless, I think that he's done a little too much damage right now to his reputation.
Yeah, I think coming off of last year and that SAG speech where he was very emboldened to aspire to be Michael Phelps or whoever he talked about, uh, he kind of developed a reputation around that. And that seems like that was the Marty character. In seeing him win awards this year, he's been a little more humble about it. But, the thing is, Oscars aren't generally given to young men. They're always given to young women, kind of the ingenues coming out. Look at Mikey Madison last year and any number of other women, but men usually get them later in their career. Michael B. Jordan's a little older, and his speech at the SAG Awards was just really wonderful and very surprising and like heartfelt. And that happened right in the middle of Oscar voting. So yeah, I'm
Yeah,
with you. I think
it's
that's a
very
big
hard
deal.
not to root for him. And I think that we don't know what the future brings. This may be the best thing that he ever does. So it would be nice to see him get acknowledged for it. So we'll see.
Hope he does. Okay, best director.
So this is really where it comes down, right? We're trying to figure out best picture versus best director. I think that Paul Thomas Anderson has this one. I just think it would be impossible for him not to win based on the fact that he's never won. And this is the moment. So it comes down to Coogler and PTA, but I just think Paul Thomas Anderson is going to win this one.
It makes me incredibly happy to say that I think Paul Thomas Anderson will win an Oscar tonight. Anybody who knows me knows that he's my guy, and I've watched in a long-suffering way as he's been passed over for every film he's ever done, and this feels like it's the time, not in a way that Scorsese got it for The Departed, where it's kind of like a makeup for a body of work, but this is a really incredible feat too. And it's going to win a ton of other awards as well. So I think, yeah, it's PTA's night. And that brings us to Best Picture. So this is the one that's kind of up in the air at this point for sure. And it's hard to say. What do you think?
Yeah, I really don't know. I think it's a total toss up, but I do think that if it splits, Paul Thomas Anderson wins Best Director and Sinners wins Best Picture. I think that's the only way that it would break down. It's possible that one battle wins both, but yeah, I'm leaning more now towards Sinners winning Best Picture. I just think that there's so much momentum about it and kind of wanting to acknowledge the film that even though one battle had all the momentum at the beginning, I think it's slightly shifted. We'll just say I would not be surprised if Sinners wins, even though I think 60-40, I think it's like 60-40 right now.
I'm going to say one battle's going to win just because it's me dreamcasting the Oscars, but also because there's never been a run like this film has had in the lead up to the Oscars with all of the wins that it's amassed in all of the different kinds of awards. It's won the cinematography awards, the editing awards, acting awards. I mean, I know Michael B. Jordan won Best Actor and Sinners won Best Ensemble, which almost locks it in for the first casting Oscar. But there's just been so much around this film, and it's definitely closer now than it was 2 months ago. But I think One Battle just has all of that momentum around it, and I don't know. I mean, I would be happy if Sinners won too. It's an incredible achievement, and I'm very excited to see Ryan Coogler on stage as well. But as a long-suffering PTA fan, I think, the odds are in his favor, at least in my head. So I'm going One Battle.
Okay. Yeah.
That's
So
yeah.
so
I
this is
mean,
this is fun. This is a good segue because I mean we basically have a two movie race going into Best Picture, much like 1964, where it was essentially a two movie race going in, and that's what we're looking
yeah,
at this week.
right. And I mean, really, from that year, other than Doctor Strangelove, these are the only two films I know that were up for Best Picture. Both just, I mean, I would argue Mary Poppins lives more in the culture thanks to Disney.
You get into
It,
your questions here.
yeah, really, they're both just these incredible feats of filmmaking. I think in different ways that really, you know what I think? I was thinking about how Mary Poppins. We'll talk about that first, but
Well, let's get into
I mean,
background for a second because I want
yeah,
to
yeah,
explain
yeah,
this. So back in the day, before we did this podcast, we used to do a re-Oscared podcast where we used to look at an Oscar year and go through all the categories. And we did quite a few of those. And I'm reminded that we did 1982. And I just watched the end of Tootsie last night and was reminded how ridiculous it is that Tootsie didn't win Best Picture. But that, it's just such a good movie. It gets better every time I see it. But putting that aside, this was the matchup I really wanted to do with 1964. And we never got to it because we decided to do this instead. But I wanted to do it because I just think it's a great matchup that year, but also because I know how little you like musicals, and I was trying to force you to watch both of these. And so here it comes up again. So I decided, the hell with it. We're going to do it this time. So we're going to match them up. Plus, it's such a. These two movies exist together in so many ways. They're connected in so many little and big ways that it's just a fun pairing to look at. And we're also talking about 64, a period of time where musicals were still one of the most popular genres of film. So it's just a really, I think, one of my favorite years to look back at, this particular matchup.
yeah. It's a time when, I mean, this is kind of the beginning of the end for the studios before the new Hollywood comes in, and
Right, that too.
they're making bigger spectacles. Um, Mary Poppins. We'll talk about the technological achievements of these, but Mary Poppins is like mind blowing in the effects they get and the way went about making it. My Fair Lady shot in Panavision Super 70, which is very akin to IMAX. This was the heyday of these big formats. Much like now, there are so many parallels where these studios and theaters are trying things to make you step away from the television, because this is 1964 and the television was really coming into prominence. People weren't leaving the house as much. Movie theaters were in danger. So just like today, I mean, we're literally repeating history by offering IMAX and promoting everything in IMAX because of people watching on television. So I find that really interesting. But I was going to say that you had pitched a few different matchups to me, and one of them was Lawrence of Arabia, and I don't remember what it was against, but I was thinking to myself, I don't want to sit through a 3-hour movie. Let's not do that. And I thought musicals are short and fun. No, this is collectively like almost 6 hours that I had to sit through these musicals.
So
Thanks a
here's the
lot.
secret as well. I think the reason I pick those matchups is because I just will not sit through movies that are this long unless I'm doing them for the pod. And that's kind of true. Like if I'm looking at times, you're right. I'm not going to watch Lawrence of Arabia. I'm not even sure I've ever seen Lawrence of Arabia, but I doubt that I would sit through it unless I was doing it for the pod at this point in my life.
I had I don't remember what the class was, but when I was in middle school, it must have been some kind of a history class or something. The teacher showed us Lawrence of Arabia, and it took like a whole week to watch it in class. And you can imagine, like sixth and seventh graders are just not into sitting and watching Lawrence of Arabia. So that was really my only experience with it, I think. I don't know if I've seen it since then. That's actually one now that I think I might want to go back and rewatch. Laura's a big fan of it, so she'll probably
Well,
watch it with me.
well, if you found a good matchup for it, I would be happy to do it. I want to just briefly talk about the just a couple of the connections that these movies have, which I think are kind of fun. We talked about it being the studio system. So I think that both of these movies were basically the pet projects of two of the biggest producers in Hollywood. So you had Walt Disney, who was obsessed with getting Mary Poppins for many, many years. It took him like 20 years to get the rights. And Jack Warner became obsessed with getting My Fair Lady, so much so that CBS had kind of owned the rights to the musical, and he bought them out and he paid more money than anyone's ever paid for the rights to anything up to that point. He paid like $5.5 million at that time, which is like what, 50, $60 million now. So, I mean, so these are both basically the obsessions of two huge producers. At the time, Mary Poppins was the most expensive movie Disney had ever made. It was like it was like a $5 million or $6 million budget for Mary Poppins. My Fair Lady was also the most expensive movie that Warner Brothers had ever made, but also the most expensive movie ever made. It cost like $17 million to make, so it had the highest budget of any movie ever up to that point.
Isn't that
So
crazy?
again, yeah, so you have two producers also throwing all of the resources that they have into these two projects. They were also both filmed entirely on the sound stages of the studios, both in California around the same time. So My Fair Lady was filmed in the Warner Brothers lot, and obviously Mary Poppins in the Disney lot. So it's just kind of like these. They both parallel each other even in those ways. That they were long-standing projects that these two producers had always wanted to get onto the screen. And so it's the culmination of a lot of years of work, all the money they could throw at it, all the resources, and they were both gunning for making the best movies that they had ever made, I think.
I think they're both set in 1910 as well.
That was the
aren't
other
they?
part. They're both set in
Yeah.
exactly the same period of time, early 1910s. Mary Poppins is set in exactly 1910, I believe, and My Fair Lady is set in like 1912. They're both
Oh,
in the
okay.
exact same place, Edwardian London. And they both have nods to women voting, like suffragettes. My Fair Lady really briefly. Mary Poppins obviously does it more. So yeah, same time, same place. It's just fascinating. That's even before you get into the Julie Andrews of it all.
Is there a possible Avengers type film coming from Mary Poppins and My Fair Lady? Interesting.
That would be pretty cool if Eliza Doolittle and Mary Poppins run into each other. That would have been something.
Yeah, it's really fascinating. I look at it as, since you're mentioning that, the two of them feel to me like, I mean, one's for kids and one's for adults. And they feel very much like representative of those producers. So there's just so much interesting overlap like that. Do you want to talk about Mary Poppins? Or do you have
Yeah,
more
you
you
want to
want
start with
to?
Mary Poppins? Let's do it.
Yeah, I mean, everybody knows Mary Poppins, right? It's because it's the thing that lasts. It's just so in the culture, and we're kind of answering one of the questions at the end, but it's basically the story of this nanny who blows in on the wind, and really she wants to get these petulant children in line, but it turns out their old man is kind of the guy who needs saving because he's really wrapped up in society and his job and has no imagination. So it really has that Disney imagination element to it. And yeah, I mean, that is, yeah, I feel like there's no character development or anything in this, and it's just kind of getting from one set piece to the next. But it's so much fun, really. A little long, but I still had a pretty good time watching it. And yeah, so I guess thanks for bringing this
Yeah. So
because I don't know. I dragged my feet and it eventually, got me.
Yeah, so you said that it's in the culture. I think you're right. I think people know Mary Poppins as a thing, and they know some songs and they've seen some clips. It, Sitting down and watching the movie is a very different thing. I think that's why everyone should go back and kind of watch it because it's not just the clips of it. Uh, and I have different feelings now that I watch it as an adult as what I did when I was a kid, and I've seen it many many times. I've watched it with both my children. My younger son really loved it. It's one of the first movies he really liked when he was a kid. So I have a fondness for it. But watching it again now, I get a few feelings about it. That I think that the first hour is very much a movie for children. And I would say it's almost one of the, I don't want to say most perfect, but it's up there for me in terms of like the first hour being one of the best first hours of any movie. I really believe that. From the setup to the point to the jolly holiday sequence, and then it ends there when it rains and they come out of the portrait. Like that initial hour, that ends just at about an hour. I think it's completely rewatchable. I think it's wonderful. What I think now as I'm older is that the second half of the movie from that point on, it almost becomes more of a movie for grown-ups. I think that it shifts to being more about the father, as you said. And I think it actually is more of a movie for adults than it is for children, because I can even speak to this from my own kids. Like in the last part of it gets a little bit slower, a little bit darker, and I think that the kids tend to get a little more bored towards that middle part, like that second hour before it wraps up the last 20 minutes. Um, I think it's almost more for grown-ups because it speaks to, yeah, that loss of innocence, that idea of getting wrapped up in what you have to do, and then it shows you what Mary Poppins is really there for. And I think you see it differently as a grown-up than you did when you were a kid. Absolutely. So I hadn't really thought about it in that way, but it's almost two distinct parts where it breaks into two different kinds of movies. But some of the best songs, you know, some of my favorite musical songs ever, I think. I could sing most of those songs. I think it's great. I think
Go
it is
ahead.
so innovative. I think going back and even watching it now, just thinking about how cool it is that they were able to put all that on screen. And you know that I'm a sucker for a good matte painting in a movie.
But
I
yeah,
love the
some
use of
really
the
good ones.
paintings. I think it's so cool. And it again shows that you don't need to make everything look realistic. You're in a movie, and My Fair Lady is similar in that way, where it's like they're not trying for realism. They're trying for a kind of fantasy world, and they create it on sound stages for that reason. But I think it's done to great effect in Mary Poppins.
The technology of it is what blew me away. I mean, there are, I don't know if these were the first instances of this, but there's film overlaid over film. So they're, and I wondered, are they, it's almost like green screen in a way because they're overlaying this film with animation. What were they acting against? Were they acting
So
against
what they had
people?
done in this instance, it wasn't green screen. They did something.
Right.
They used something called sodium vapor, allowed which allowed the yeah, it's slightly different than green screen. This was a particular type of technology they used just for this movie, and I'm trying to think, but I don't think they were able to recreate it again. To be honest, I think it's maybe the only time they used it. But it gave them the look that they were looking for. But you're right, the idea of they had been mixing animation and live action for a long time. I mean, it was done in a much cruder looking way, but even in the mid 50s when Gene Kelly dances with Jerry from Tom and Jerry. So they've been doing things like that. But this, where you're putting actors into a fully animated background, it is a bit of a difference. It's really some high level stuff that they had to do.
It's like reverse Roger Rabbit, where you're
Right.
putting
Yeah.
the uh yeah, there are so many other techniques that like there's stop motion, which I know had been around for a while, but there's reverse. There's some moments where things are in reverse, and I remember last week the editor of Taking of Pelham 123 was saying that even in the 70s, it was a little difficult to speed things up or to play them backwards to get that effect. So to do that in 1964 is really impressive. That because I wasn't into the music. By the way, we should mention that the two brothers who what
Sherman
do you know
Brothers, yeah.
the Sherman brothers won 2 Oscars for this for their music, but because I wasn't into that, I really focused on the technical aspects of it, and it almost gets for a little while like, reminded me of a Sam Raimi movie, like The Evil Dead or something with the kind of like the speeding cameras and the sort of jagged, motion of things. So I enjoyed thinking about Sam Raimi watching Mary Poppins as I did
That's really
this.
funny. Maybe he was inspired by Mary Poppins. But yeah, you're right. They use stop motion. They use animatronics. They pulled out all the stops. This is, like you said, this is kind of Disney using every trick that they had ever come up with, and they put it into one movie to make something that is pretty original and also wholly Disney. I mean, it is kind of the quintessential Disney movie, I think, as far as I'm concerned, or the quintessential Walt Disney movie. We'll put it that way.
And I think again, because the industry was struggling at this point, just like now, they figured, well, let's throw a ton of money at something because that's going to make it more appealing. And this is a very broad film, so I think that also is kind of similar to now, where hell, most Disney movies, when you look at Marvel or Star Wars, they're very broad now because they need that international money. And I don't know if that was as interesting back then, but now, that's what people focus on to bring in more box office. Back then, I think it was just about appealing to people who maybe didn't want to spend 50 cents or whatever it was to step away from their televisions in America. But there's something for everyone in there because of those two stories of the children and then the adults at the end, I think. But I kept thinking, this is where my mind goes with this. I see them jump into a chalk painting, going about their day, and then that happens. And I kept thinking, I bet this is what every day was like for David Lynch. Like, this must be how he walked through the world. And I really, really love it. But yeah, I think that story at the end is really, I wouldn't say it's a super strong script by any means, but the story that the old man really needs the saving is kind of an interesting twist on it. So
Yeah, and you're right. It's not that necessarily that strong of a script because you can see very clearly it's just a series of vignettes because it's based on the original Mary Poppins book, which is that it's a bunch of stories and they're trying to pull together into one cohesive story, but stay true to Mary Poppins because the writer of Mary Poppins, P.L. Travers at the time, that's why it took 20 years to get for Walt Disney to get the rights to it. She was very against the idea of doing this. And they had to do a lot of things to try to get her on board. They made a whole movie about it called Saving Mr. Banks, which is also really enjoyable, but not 100% true. Just so everyone knows, it's not exactly how it went down. And she actually never really fully embraced Mary Poppins. She was still angry about it at the end, and so much so that she refused to have any sequels made. But also, when they made the Broadway musical of it, she demanded that no one involved in the Walt Disney movie could be involved in the play. So she
wow,
was
what a sour
never
experience.
pleased about it. She was just kind of a hard ass at the beginning, and she stayed that way. So the Saving Mr. Banks movie doesn't really get at how it actually ends up. But anyway, yeah. So they had to make concessions to her, and that's partially why the structure is the way that it is, and um, they tried hard to please her in a lot of ways. But she was disappointed. She thought that Mary Poppins wasn't mean enough, which again just goes to show you that there's books and then there's movies, and you shouldn't necessarily let the people who made the books be the people who decide what goes on in a film. Walt Disney understood what the movie needed to be. Like, who would want to watch a Mary Poppins movie where Mary Poppins is terrible the whole time? You have to give her some, something that makes you want to root for her.
Yeah, so maybe that's a good segue into Julie Andrews, who plays Mary Poppins, won Best Actress at the Academy Awards for this role. It originated the My Fair Lady role of Eliza Doolittle on Broadway,
Correct.
but ended up being kind of locked into this and wasn't selected to do that. But
Yeah. So the story goes, I'll handle this part because this
Please
is the
do.
kind of stuff that I like. This is the reason I really like these two movies. So Julie Andrews had done the show on Broadway with Rex Harrison. It was hugely successful, and a lot of people were rooting for her to get the role in the movie. Jack Warner decided that she just wasn't well known enough. She wasn't enough of a movie star, and he wanted someone with a big name. So he went with Audrey Hepburn, which surprised a lot of people, especially because Audrey Hepburn wasn't known for singing. But he wanted that face. Of course, we find out later that she didn't actually sing in My Fair Lady either, which they kind of tried to keep under wraps for a while, but it got out eventually that her voice was dubbed. So that's even more surprising. But yeah, the fact that Julie Andrews got passed over for My Fair Lady allows her to take the role of Mary Poppins, which she ends up winning the Academy Award for. And in the acceptance speech of the Golden Globes, she actually thanks Jack Warner for allowing it to happen, which is just kind of a fun little moment. And he laughed from the audience. He got a kick out of it as well, because in truth, he got what he wanted. I mean, he didn't want her, and maybe he was right. Who knows? The thing that I thought was interesting, to get into some real musical nerddom, is that Audrey Hepburn starred in the play Gigi, in the original stage play of Gigi, which was then turned into a movie musical by the same guys who made My Fair Lady, Lerner and Loewe. They wrote both. And when they went to make the movie of Gigi the musical, Audrey Hepburn, who had originated the role on Broadway, they had looked at her, but she actually turned it down because she was kind of burned out on the role. So, a lot of people assume she would move into the role on the movies, and she didn't do that. But then she ends up taking this role from Julie Andrews from the stage to the screen. I just think it's a fun little parallel in that regard as well. So
Yeah, they're really kind of running in the same circles. And
yeah, all of these things are running together.
yeah. And this was Julie Andrews' first film, right?
It was.
That's crazy.
It is crazy. Yeah.
I mean, when we talk about career peaks in our
Yeah,
questions.
and for her, you think about it, not only is she making her first movie, but she's walking into making her first movie in a movie unlike any other movie. I mean, she's acting a lot on a soundstage with nothing around her. You asked how it was done. It was done with them just kind of dancing to nothing on sound stages, and then they add all this stuff later. So the degree of difficulty of what she was doing was pretty high. So it really is a remarkable performance.
And she won this Oscar beating out Anne Bancroft, Sophia Loren, Debbie Reynolds, and Kim Stanley. So first film, you come in and you pick those ladies off. It's pretty amazing.
So are you aware of some of the other people that were up for the role that they looked at for Mary Poppins till they finally decided on Julie Andrews? I mean, again, once they saw Julie Andrews, Walt Disney apparently saw her on the Ed Sullivan Show or something. She was doing a song from Camelot, I think it was. Also that was also done by Lerner and Loewe, Camelot, I think.
Right.
Oh, and he just decided that she was it. But Angela Lansbury was considered, which is kind of cool to think about. I mean, that makes perfect sense. I could see that. Judy Garland was looked at. Elizabeth Taylor, Natalie Wood. My favorite is Betty Davis. Betty Davis also considered. The thought of Betty Davis playing Mary Poppins makes me laugh. Like, I think that would be pretty great. So a lot of roads not taken. So think about this. So some of the men that were considered, Adam West was one of the people considered for the part.
Wow.
Just think about Adam West and Betty Davis and Mary Poppins. I don't know what to say to that. Cary Grant was actually considered for both. Cary Grant was considered for casting as Bert in Mary Poppins, but he was also looked at to replace Rex Harrison in My Fair Lady. But the story goes that not only did he turn it down, he turned down My Fair Lady, he said, I don't want to do it, and if you don't cast Rex Harrison, I'm never going to do another movie for Warner Brothers ever again. He was very adamant about keeping Harrison. I don't know why, because by all accounts, Rex Harrison was a super jerk. He was one of the most disliked actors in all of Hollywood. But
I'm not surprised by that.
Yeah, he's
seeing his
he
role in this.
was yeah, he was a dick. So even his own kids and even anyone that worked with him, but we won't get into this. But yeah, Cary Grant just felt like for the integrity of the movie, it had to stay that way. But yeah, Cary Grant was up for both parts.
That's interesting. And he worked with Audrey Hepburn, I think, the year before in Charade, right?
That's right. That's right.
Which is written by Stone. I can't remember his first name. Who wrote
Oh,
the
taking
Taking
a
of Pelham
Pelham.
1, 2, 3.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow, what an incestuous community this is for that 10 years between or that 20 years, I guess, between 60s and 70s. Very interesting. Okay, we have to talk about Dick Van Dyke, who
We
is
do.
incredible. I have to say that he always reminds me of my great uncle, who we call Uncle Joe, who celebrated his 102nd birthday last week. So happy birthday, Uncle Joe. But they're very, I guess, because they're the same age, basically. And what Dick Van Dyke does as a physical actor is just unbelievable. He's so compelling to watch with his physicality. It's really amazing.
And just understand that Dick Van Dyke never took a dance lesson in his life. Like the
Really?
choreographers of this movie were astounded at what he was able to pull off, having not been trained in dance. Like the step in time sequence at the end, where he's, matching seasoned dancers step for step. Some of the stuff that he does in that sequence is really something. It's amazing that he never took a dance lesson. He was just naturally gifted in terms of movement, and he brings such joy. I could go on and on about like just how wonderful. I love the Dick Van Dyke Show. I liked Bye Bye Birdie only for Dick Van Dyke. I think that show is a bit insufferable, to be honest. But he's wonderful in that. There's just something about him that is so joyous to watch. That uh, even though his accent is legitimately ranked as one of the worst Cockney accents that's ever been
Yeah.
put on film, it doesn't even matter. It's really really great. He's just so fun to watch. And at one point, I've watched it so many times now. In the after the step in time scene at the end when he's talking to Mr. Banks, he actually drops the accent for about a minute. It just goes away. I never noticed that till now. If you go back and watch it, I think he just got tired and gave up, and he just sounds like Dick Van Dyke for a minute, and then he goes back to it. But
That's really funny. Yeah, he is. I mean, the Dick Van Dyke Show is happening at this time, so he's very. That's probably what he's maybe most known for. I think,
yeah,
right, is the show,
yeah. He
and
had just done Bye Bye Birdie on Broadway as well. I'm not
right,
sure if this is before the Bye Bye Birdie movie came out. I think this could be. I I don't even remember, but I know he had done it on Broadway.
right, and he actually spends a lot of time on TV, kind of after this era. He's in a lot of Disney films and other things, but really, I mean, I know him growing up from being on television all the time. So it's interesting that he has so much success in film and then he kind of ends up being a guest star in a lot of things. And I guess doing a lot of theater as well.
Yeah.
But
Wow.
he,
I didn't. So Dick Van Dyke Show ran. I didn't realize it ran that long. It ran from it ran from 61 to 66. So it actually ran 5 years. So he's in the middle of that. He had done my Bye Bye Birdie on the stage, and the Bye Bye Birdie movie came out in 63. And then he makes Mary Poppins after that. Man, Dick Van Dyke is on quite a run here.
yeah, it's really impressive. And not even nominated for Best Actor for this.
Well,
What do you
the
think about
accent did
that?
him in without a
Yeah.
doubt. You
But
just
the
if
work,
you
you know?
you just couldn't give it to him. But
Yeah,
in our
but
hearts, he's the Oscar winner in our hearts because he really. I know Julie Andrews is amazing, but in my mind, Bert is kind of the heart and soul of the movie.
he really is. I mean, he kind of leads everything. She almost falls sort of out of the picture for a while because he's a bit of a tour guide and really kind of showing these kids around and then he plays a double role. So, I just think there's so much of him in this in so many different ways that it's a shame he was overlooked. Is there anybody else in the cast that you want to talk about? I mean, there aren't too many people other than the Bankses, but
Yeah, well, I mean, Mr. and Mrs. Banks obviously are worth talking about because Glynis Johns, who was also in While You Were Sleeping, as I mentioned last week, she's wonderful in that movie. So she plays the wife in this. It always makes me laugh that her character kind of makes me laugh in this movie too, because I don't even know what she does. Like she's never there. She's basically just obsessed with getting women the right to vote, and I think it's very modern in that way. Where Mr.
yeah,
Banks
nothing wrong
never
with
seems to
that.
have a problem with this, but she devotes all of her time to her causes and is never there for her children at all. And
Yeah.
this isn't a problem. So see, it's very it's a very liberating moment, I think, in the movie. But
Yeah, both of these have some great feminism in them for the
yeah,
most part.
but David Tomlinson is George Banks. I mean, he's was the first choice, I think, for this role, and he's really memorable. I think he has a lot of great scenes. Oh, he also does some voice work. He also does the voice of Mary Poppins' umbrella.
Right. I
Yeah,
love that umbrella, the parrot,
love
the
the
talking
umbrella.
parrot.
A couple
Very
of
good.
things I have to mention, just in terms of the voice work. We're talking about cast. So Julie Andrews also does the voice of the bird. That's like she does. Like they hired a professional whistler to do the whistling for Spoonful of Sugar, but it was almost too professional. So she did that whistling that the bird does in that song,
Wow.
which is a cool, fun little thing. But the main
Yeah.
thing, as we talk about the parallels of these movies again, in the Jolly Holiday sequence, when the animals are singing, the voice of the geese in that scene, uh, the is Marnie Nixon. So who's Marnie Nixon? Marnie Nixon is the woman who is the one that does the singing in My Fair Lady for
Right.
Audrey Hepburn. So
Yeah.
same person. And then she ends up being one of the nuns in The Sound of Music the following year with Julie Andrews. So just a little through line for Marnie Nixon in these movies as well.
So intertwined.
Yes.
What I'm gonna bring this shows you where we are with this episode, but what I'm gonna bring is that the constable is played by Arthur Treacher, who I only know because of Arthur Treacher's seafood restaurants in America. Do you remember those?
Amazing. Yeah, I actually didn't know that. I forgot. Oh, one other casting thing. So for Admiral Boom,
Great
the
character.
yeah, so the person who was originally going to play Admiral Boom was Stanley Holloway. And the reason he couldn't take that role is because he was playing Alfred Doolittle in My Fair Lady. So again, he had to drop out of playing Admiral Boom.
Gosh, if these were like a year apart, it would be all the same people. It
Yeah.
feels like.
Yeah,
It's
and
really
it also
interesting.
shows that like my obsession of the connection between these two movies is bordering on unhealthy. But like I love this is the kind of stuff that I love, like these little things, these connections that all, these movies have. This is this is the kind of stuff I bore my wife with all the time. So I'm really glad that I can share it with you instead.
It it feels like it could be a book or like a chapter of a book or something.
Maybe that's possible. One other thing that I discovered, which I think is worth mentioning. You know what? We'll save this because we're talking about the cast right now. So we'll save that part to the end.
Well, I don't know that there's anybody left to talk about in the cast. We can probably move on to the directing, Robert Stevenson, and just I'm so impressed by Robert Stevenson's direction in this because of not only the technical aspects that he had to oversee, but the performances that he got from these people in this time where acting against nothing is probably a lot harder to do than it is now. And their performances are really great. Dick Van Dyke's accent aside, but I think as a director, he really is impressive with what he put together here, and it kind of landed him a spot in the Disney stable of directors going forward.
Yeah. So he had already done. What did he do? So he did the Absent-Minded Professor, which that was a Disney movie, I believe. Or am I crazy? No, that was yeah, that was a Walt Disney movie. Yes. So that was like I think one of the first movies he did for Disney, and so he did that one. He did the sequel. So those were like 61 and 62. But right after Mary Poppins, he really goes on to make quite a few movies with with Disney, including Bedknobs and Broomsticks and The Love Bug, which are
Yeah.
two movies that I loved as a kid.
I love The Love Bug as a kid because we had a Volkswagen. So, yeah, Stevenson, really solid. The writing, I didn't love the writing, but again, it sounds like these writers had a lot to deal with. Bill
Yeah,
Walsh
I think
and
they were
Don
hemmed in
DeGratti.
by what T.L. Travers was kind of hovering over them to do. So I don't know if they had a lot of freedom with that. But right, in terms of directing, I mean, we'll get into My Fair Lady, but George Cukor actually wins the Best Director award, and I can't really argue with it because it's kind of a recognition of Cukor's lifetime of work up to this point. I mean, My Fair Lady is his crowning achievement in a lot of ways, but he had directed a lot of successful movies before that and hadn't won. I think My Fair Lady is the only movie he won for. So it's hard to argue against it. But you could definitely make an argument that Stevenson's directing task was harder at that time than what Cukor was doing because the giant sets and everything was kind of there to work with, where Stevenson was working on a black soundstage with nothing and trying to get performances out of actors who were acting against stuff they couldn't even see. So, degree of difficulty in 64, I think definitely goes to Stevenson.
Yeah. Who actually was nominated, but obviously lost to Cukor. Also nominated was Stanley Kubrick for Dr. Strangelove. So Cukor beat out Kubrick for an Oscar, which is pretty cool. Is there anything else you want to talk about with Mary Poppins? I know you could talk all day about it,
There's
but
a million things I could talk about with Mary Poppins.
let's talk about the strengths and weaknesses.
Yeah. So again, I think the first hour will match up against anything. I think it's highly watchable. It's highly rewatchable. I enjoy it every time. It never feels old to me. The second half drags a little bit, as we've said, and I think it shifts into a slightly different movie. So the strengths are definitely the first hour, without a doubt. Strength is obviously the music. The strength is just the look of it. There, even in rewatching it, there's all these little things that you kind of notice in even in the animation. It's even one of my favorite things is that when they're in the Jolly Holiday sequence and they're racing with the merry-go-round horses. When the horses are running, you actually see the divot in the ground and the dirt roofs.
Yeah.
I love that. For some reason, I fixate on it every time I see the movie. I just think about, in terms of the animation and in terms of putting that scene together, how difficult that probably was to do in 64. It's a small little detail, but just shows you how careful they were about trying to do this. And then the other part of that sequence where Dick Van Dyke is dancing with the penguins, if you notice, the penguins like duck underneath him when he's spinning around. And yeah, it's like that, they were looking that carefully. So they were noticing that they're dancing next to each other, that it would have to be done that way. So they put these little things like that into it. I just think that everyone was at the top of their game and the attention to detail is so perfect.
It really is. And this won a handful of technical Oscars, well deserved because of that, because putting this together is just a really incredible feat. And I'm so glad I watched it just so I could think about that. I mean, I'm not glad I watched it because I
Come
kind of
on,
hated
you're
the story,
humming
but
Chim Chimmery in the shower without even knowing why you're doing it. It gets in your soul.
well, that's the other thing is the music is so memorable. That's definitely a strength for me. And I even unconsciously referenced it in our Other Guys episode when I said that Adam McKay puts the medicine in a spoonful of sugar. So it
One
just
other nerdy
permeates.
thing, speaking of the spoonful of sugar. So when she pours the medicine into the spoons and it's a different
Yeah.
color for each of them, the kids
Yeah.
did not know that was going to happen. That was done actually for real. That wasn't digital.
How did they do
So
that?
I don't even know, but they did that on screen.
Yeah.
And the reaction that she has, that Jane has, is a real reaction because she did not know that was going to happen.
That's the thing. There are so many little flourishes in this, whether they're truly like technical marvels or just something like that. I mean, I don't remember what the editing was like in that scene, but it could be they just switched bottles or something. I don't know, but it's really little things like that kind of make it all the more fun because you're just not expecting something so like fantastical and creative. I mean, this is a film about creativity, and that's one of my strengths for it is that the theme is really like have some fun, have some imagination in your day, like live your life as a responsible person, but make time for play and make time for just being a kid again. And even though I don't think it's a great script, like the idea that it's trying to put forward is something that I just like really wrap my arms around because everybody should take a lesson from it and live that way. So yeah, I mean, uh, didn't didn't really love it. I'll never watch it again, probably, but it was fun to sit through at least once. Not really a lot of strengths, or not really a lot of weaknesses for me, other than sort of the thin plot. Yeah, it really just uh, quite a feat. I'm
Yeah,
I'm
I've
very
argued
happy.
with my wife about this in the past because she thinks that the step in time sequence is just too long. I don't feel that way. And fun little fact about that sequence, because of time constraints, was only supposed to be about 2 minutes long. Um, and it ended up stretching into like it's 14 minutes long, that scene. It's one of the longest sequences. So just because everyone fell in love with it. But even that, the use of the fireworks and the fact that you're acting with the overlays in terms of that, the people are reacting to the fireworks flying around, which aren't real. So it's just another fun little use of camera work and actors having to act against things that aren't there. It's a lot going on in that sequence.
Yeah. If I'm being honest, I fast forwarded a little bit through the musical numbers just because I didn't want to sit through them, and it was like 1,000 hours long. So,
That hurts my
uh,
feelings. Um, oh man,
but I mean, it would be like a minute. You just said one was 14 minutes, so I still watched 13 minutes of it.
it was
But
14.
I thought, come on, who has the time? Okay, well then let's move on to My Fair Lady.
Well, hang on. Can I end with one more fun fact about Mary Poppins, which I think is a good one. So Mary Poppins was the the highest grossing movie of 1964 and made Disney a lot of money. So Walt Disney took some of the profits from Mary Poppins and used it to buy land in Florida, which ended up becoming Disney World. So you can directly thank Mary Poppins for the existence of Disney World. Whether or not that's good or bad, that depends on how you feel about it. But that is also the legacy of Mary Poppins.
Interesting. The house that Mary Poppins built.
Mm-hmm.
How about that?
Yeah.
Wow, land must have been really cheap down there. Okay, let's move on to My Fair Lady. This is the Best Picture winner
It is.
based on.
So just to get into those facts. So Mary Poppins was the highest grossing movie, 64. My Fair Lady was the second highest grossing movie of 64. They were both up for Best Picture, ranked 1 and 2 at the time. And the list of greatest musicals of all time, they actually kind of rank back to back. I think in the AFI listing of greatest musicals of all time, they're like 5 and 6. Mary Poppins is 5 and My Fair Lady is 6. So these movies are just intertwined forever.
It really feels like kind of a Sinners one battle after another thing to me, where Sinners is kind of the fan favorite. People love Sinners, and I mean, people love One Battle too, but it's more of like a critical thing than a populist thing. And that's how this feels because My Fair Lady, smaller box office, as far as longevity goes. I mean, and the Disney machine is behind Mary Poppins, so that helps. But when I think about these two films, I mean, even the critics rating, the audience ratings on Rotten Tomatoes, My Fair Lady is a little lower, and yet it won Best Picture, so that feels very in line with the Oscars and culture to me.
And again, we talk about the Oscars as being a popularity contest. I mean, you don't think that the fact that Jack Warner was probably the most powerful person in Hollywood at the time might have had something to do with My Fair Lady winning Best Picture. I mean, I don't doubt it. Not to throw any shade at My Fair Lady, but come on.
But then Dick Van Dyke made that remark about opera and ballet, so it was kind of like all
Exactly.
over.
Tank the whole damn thing.
Yeah. So this is based on the George Bernard Shaw play Pygmalion, and it's the story of a snobby phonetics professor that makes a bet that he can turn this crude street girl into a woman of high society, basically. Very similar to a film we discussed a few weeks ago, Pretty Woman.
It is.
So it's all of this is fresh
Pygmalion
in my mind.
story has been told a million times
Yeah.
since. So yeah. So
Trading
one fun fact
places.
about this right out of the gate is that apparently Rodgers and Hammerstein had been contracted to write a musical adaptation of Pygmalion, and they worked on this for a couple of years, and not only failed, they actually said that it was unfilmable. It was unworkable as a musical. They said it couldn't be done. So Rodgers and Hammerstein considered two of the best musical writers of all time. Yeah, they just couldn't crack it. And you bring in Lerner and Lowe, and the trick that they understood was that they had to turn the songs into more dialogue based songs, as opposed to full blown numbers. As you could see that Henry Higgins mostly talks most of his songs.
I was going to say that's great for him.
And they understood that that was the trick that would make it work as a musical. And once they unlocked that part of it, the whole thing kind of opened up for them.
It's nice to have songs that sort of tie to what's going on and almost move the plot along a little bit. Sometimes you don't get that necessarily. So I kind of enjoyed that about it.
See, this already is where we disagree. It's actually
Really?
one
Okay.
of my things about My Fair Lady that I don't necessarily love. I like my songs to be songs. I don't really love the talky songs of My Fair Lady. Doesn't move me.
Well, you're talking to someone who fast forwarded the musical parts in Mary Poppins.
I know.
The closer to dialogue and telling a story, the better for me. And that's the thing with this is that it, unlike Mary Poppins, has a clear character arc for at least one of the characters. So it's just in that way, it feels to me like a better film that I'm more interested in because it's telling a story and it's not just a bunch of whimsical set pieces. So I immediately like this a lot better because of that. Also, it looked amazing. It doesn't have the technical prowess of Mary Poppins, but shot in Panavision Super 70, which we mentioned earlier, and really nicely lit like a stage play, with very diffuse light, which you don't see in Mary Poppins or a lot of stuff around this time. I really, just visually, it didn't have all the bells and whistles, but it looked really nice. And watching an HD version of it with that Panavision 70 millimeter, it brings it all out. So I was immediately drawn in by how this looked.
Yeah. I mean, you see, again, this was the most expensive movie ever made up to this point. And you can see it. I mean, it is all there on the screen. It is some beautiful sets.
Yeah, I really loved looking at it. Great dialogue. It's written so beautifully. I really enjoyed just the sharp, fast conversation in it. I did not love how aggressive it is towards women and like mean about the status of women. That really, really irked me. So
We'll
very
get
much
into the
of it's
weaknesses.
fine.
Oh, well, I mean, I'm happy to say this now. It's the part of My Fair Lady leaves me cold. It really does. It's I've always said this to you, where there are movies that I love and there's movies that I appreciate. And My Fair Lady definitely falls into a movie I appreciate more than I actually like. I find Eliza's character at the beginning to be a little too much for me.
Oh, it's a cartoon.
Yeah, it's a lot. I also find Higgins to just be an insufferable blowhard,
Right.
which
Yeah,
I
me
don't
too.
necessarily love. But you talked about the character arc, and I agree with you completely. I like that part of the story. But I really feel like the ending does a lot to undercut the movie, and it
I hate
really hurts it for me.
Yep.
And just to be clear, that George Bernard Shaw, who wrote Pygmalion, hated this as well. That was not the ending of his original story. Just even the hint of the fact that she goes back to Henry at the end and stays, which they don't say explicitly, but they hint at. And even that alone for me, it undercuts Eliza's arc enough where it really, to me, hurts the movie.
It basically turns her from an independent woman into like a kept woman, because she comes back and now she has status and elocution and a little money, but she's still not independent. And yeah, that really, really bugged me. I mean, it totally undoes everything. And I thought it was going to end with her just leaving. And, also Rex Harrison doesn't have a character arc necessarily. He's
Exactly. So
the
she comes
same
back to
guy.
him, but he doesn't seem to change at all. All he gets
Yeah.
is the realization that he liked having her around.
Right.
Which, what the hell is that? But
Yeah.
that's enough. And so so she comes back to that. Like, I don't even get it. She should, if she was going to stay with one of them, she should stay with Pickering, who actually treated her much better than Higgins does in the first place.
Yeah, that's kind of the point that she makes, isn't it? That the way she grew is because he was kind to her and actually saw her. And, Higgins gives her these tools, but he also treats her so terribly, almost like she's the help. I mean, he wants her to get his slippers. He
Yeah,
wants
he
her to
calls
like
her a
leave notes
gutter
for the house
snipe
door.
repeatedly,
It
and,
really
and
made
a
me
brazen
angry.
hussy more than once. It's like, and this is at the end of the movie.
Yeah, it's yeah, like after he's had the realization. I mean, what you learn about him is that he's like a pouting mama's boy who just curls up on the couch because he can't get his way. And yeah, there's just zero growth from this guy, which is why it's so frustrating that she comes back. I mean, that's a Hollywood ending, I guess. But when you look at it, say, in relation to like Pretty Woman, Edward has a great turnaround. He becomes kind. He helps Ralph Bellamy rebuild his company. He listens to Julia Roberts' character. So at least there's something there. I like that they righted a wrong that
Yeah.
My
I
Fair
don't know
Lady
if
puts
it's
out
a
there.
sign of the times where in 64 you can get away with him not evolving at all, but her still coming back, and that's just what 1964 is. I don't know for sure. But yeah, it really, a lot of parts of this movie leave me cold. I think part of it also is the whole idea of high society and being judged for all these little things, the way you behave. Like, I have a natural aversion to that kind of stuff. I really do. So that kind of heightened obsession with like class and breeding and stuff just really turns me cold. So again, I can appreciate My Fair Lady as an achievement in filmmaking and an achievement in a lot of ways. But as far as a movie goes, it really leaves me cold, and I don't particularly love it.
The idea that Rex Harrison won the Oscar for that role over Peter Sellers in Doctor Strangelove specifically, but also Anthony Quinn in Zorba the Greek and Richard Burton in Beckett is
Yeah,
mind blowing.
I think that
It
part
really
of it
is.
is so the thing about this, what I read is that the whole point of when you make movie musicals, you record the music and then you dub it and you lip sync to it when you're filming. So Rex Harrison refused to do this. He said because he had never sang the songs the same way twice, he could never lip sync it properly. So he demanded to be able to sing the songs live. So they had to figure out a way to mic him up so that he could actually do the songs live. And they won an Academy Award, a technical award for sound, I think, for this movie. And that was one of the main reasons. So think about how hard that was in 64 to figure out how to mic him up to do something they'd never really do, which was to perform it live and capture it on film. So it was quite a feat back then to pull that off. And I think that may be part of why Harrison won the Academy Award, that they knew that he was singing all this stuff live, and possibly.
It's really just talking, right? So,
Yeah, but it's very dialogue heavy. I mean, it's a lot of words
yeah.
in that. I actually was watching it is with Logan at one point. He just came into the room and we watched one of the things, and he's saying a lot of words. It's like, yeah, you got a lot of words.
Some of them are terrible and demeaning. But yeah, I that's what I thought about a lot is like the cadence to the words, even when he wasn't singing, quote unquote, necessarily, but a lot of big words and a lot of things to kind of really nail. And I guess he does do a good job of that. But I just really hearing that he's kind of a jerk in real life, it makes it even more apparent how
Not just a
terrible he is on
jerk,
screen.
like a reviled figure. There are people who like refuse to work with him again. Like he treated most people like they were dirt, particularly actresses. Both Audrey Hepburn and Julie Andrews. Julie Andrews and him had a huge falling out apparently, because he treated her like garbage as well. And at one point, she just couldn't take it anymore. So there's all these stories about him. His own kid said that he was not a good guy. The people he served in the military with said that he wasn't a good person. Like, yeah.
So how does he? Well, I guess it doesn't matter what you put on screen is
right. Yeah, I don't want to make this podcast a thing
want.
about slamming Rex Harrison. By the way, it's not why we're doing this. But
That reminds
point
me
is,
of there was this story I read where they interviewed Joel Schumacher, and after the Batman film that he made with Val Kilmer, he said there are two things I'll never do: climb Mount Everest and work with Val Kilmer again. So that's kind of how I feel like this probably was with Rex Harrison. Just yeah, maybe he's a method actor and stays in character as Henry
and maybe
Higgins.
that's why he was so good at playing Henry Higgins, because it's like, yeah, I find Henry Higgins to be an unlikable character. I don't think there's much in him to like. So
yeah, really, there isn't. Do you want to talk about any more cast members that I think probably have some
yeah,
things to
I mean,
say
the
about
thing
them?
with this is, I mean, there's a lot of people in it, but as far as the cast goes, yeah, it's very much a 2-person movie. I mean, well, 3 people, because I think that Wilfred Hyde White, who plays Pickering, also has a good part in it. But Jeremy Brett, the guy who plays Freddy, who's the person that falls in love with her, his singing was dubbed as well, which wasn't found out until years later, interestingly enough. But they also overdubbed
People not
his
know
singing.
this.
Yeah. I mean, they did a good job of keeping things on the raps back then. But look, I mean, you talked about Mary Poppins not being a great story, but in my mind, the progression of characters of My Fair Lady doesn't really work unless you forgive a lot of things. Like the idea that Freddie falls in love with Eliza instantly at that one meeting that they have where they barely speak seems like a lot.
And then he stays outside her house like Bob in Fight Club, waiting to be let in.
Right. So yeah, yeah. So there's a few things going on with this.
I mean, I'm breaking it down solely on character arc, and this has a character with an arc, and Mary Poppins doesn't. Essentially,
I'll give you that. That's fair.
So, but yeah,
we talk about we already mentioned Stanley Holloway, who played Alfred Doolittle. I think he was nominated as well for playing Eliza's father. And I will say that in terms of the music of My Fair Lady, there's a few songs I do like, and there's a few songs that are very well known from My Fair Lady. On the Street Where You Live, which is the song that Jeremy Brett did not sing as Freddie, but that one as well. So yeah, I could have danced all night is one of the main ones. Wouldn't It Be Loverly is my favorite song from My Fair Lady. Wouldn't It Be Loverly by far is my favorite.
Which one is the one that her father sings when he's getting married? Church bells.
Yeah, Get Me to the Church on Time. That's another one.
Yeah, that's fun.
So yeah, it's funny you mentioned that, because I was going to say that the Step in Time sequence in Mary Poppins is considered really long, and I said my wife thinks it's too long. I think that Get Me to the Church on Time feels longer than Step in Time, partially because it's the same lyrics being repeated over and over and over again.
Yeah.
So the song could have been half as long. I don't know why they just kept I think they extended it because they liked the set piece of it. And speaking of technical feats, I mean, that was all done on a soundstage in one small little space, and they had to keep changing the colors to make it seem like he was going to new bars. So in terms of a technical feat of filming, it's really fun to watch, but I think that drags on way too long. That's all.
A lot of the it's not as technical as Mary Poppins, but a lot of the things that they pull off here are very theater technical because they have a set, then they have to pull off those things to make the audience think something is something different, and they do that in real time. And that's its own thing that's very impressive. But they're not using a lot of the film techniques or anything that Mary Poppins uses, but still, pretty well accomplished as a technical film.
Yeah,
You
I mean, you have a
mentioned
lot. So the other thing I would say is that I think that the song "With a Little Bit of Luck" is a better song than "Get Me to the Church on Time." I like that sequence better. It introduces the father's character, which is fun, and I just think it's fun to watch because it's moving the whole time. They're moving throughout the set. I enjoy I enjoy my singing and dancing. Let me just say that. Like, I enjoy the full musical experience, which is the other reason My Fair Lady doesn't top my favorite musicals. There's no dancing in this movie at all. I mean, other than the "I Could Have Danced All Night" sequence, which is barely dancing. They're like jumping around and stuff. One of them pretends to be a bull. That's not dancing. I don't get down with that. I want to see some full-blown dancing.
I mean, in fact, there's the opposite where people just freeze in place a bunch of times. What the hell is that?
Good point. They strut, stand still. Like, that's not musical to me. So with a little
Henry
bit of luck
Higgins
is the
isn't
only
singing.
yeah, with a little bit of luck and "Get Me to the Church on Time" are the only sequences where there's actually movement going on a lot to accompany the singing. And so I think that's why I probably like those a little more. But yeah, I'm a Gene Kelly, Fred Astaire musical kind of guy. I need to see some dancing around.
Man, if only you were an Oscar voter in 1964, it would have been a different story. All right. We should talk about George Cukor a little more. He won Best
Should.
Director for this. Very much known to be a director of women. It reminded me of, Paul Feig reminds me of him in the way that he has a reputation for really uh, being kind to women on screen and giving them their due on camera. So you really see that here. I think he's such a solid director. I mean, and like we said, the people he's up against, Kubrick and the like, in this category, he does stand out, and I think it's just a credit to him. I don't know if this is the I guess it is the biggest film he worked on, right? Because
Possibly.
it's
I mean,
such
you
a
say he's known as a director of women. He also is a director of The Women, which is a movie that
right,
everyone should go
exactly.
watch. I mean,
Yes.
that's a really good movie from what, like 39 or something.
Yeah, not the
But yeah,
remake with
he directed a few of my all-time favorite movies. So he directed Gaslight, which is a movie that's become so much more important than anyone ever thought that it would be. Um,
yeah,
it's starting to be a
sadly.
touchstone of culture at this point. But many people haven't even seen the movie itself, so you should go back and watch it. But he also directed The Star is Born with Judy Garland. He directed The Philadelphia Story, which is one of my favorite movies of all time, honestly.
Me too.
And he directed Adam's Rib, which is one of the classic Hepburn and Tracy movies, which is also really funny. So yeah, he's got a lot of good, well respected movies under his belt. But My Fair Lady is kind of his crowning achievement of just putting everything together to pull off this huge, massive soundstage musical.
And when you list those, I mean, that's such a great example of how the bulk of those films have a woman at the center. So they're very like female-led films, and that's kind of how he got his reputation, and all great films, So, yeah, I really love this guy, and I think he does a really solid job here. Again, it's not technical in the same way, but overseeing, I would imagine, almost everything in real time, like a stage play. He's basically a stage director in this film, and that's sort of its own thing. I don't know if he directed any plays or musicals, in theater, but he really, I think, does a good job here of directing this like a stage play or a stage musical. So that's an interesting set of skills, and I would imagine that's probably something that most directors had back then, since all of these films were, especially in the 60s, leaning into
Yeah,
musicals and big spectacles.
right.
So
But also,
maybe
if you
it's not
came
that.
up through the directing ranks in the 40s, 50s, you might have directed a little bit of TV, and a lot of that was done on sound stages. So a lot of that was done live at the beginning. So I think you'd have a an idea of how to film live television and productions like that.
It's a good point. Do you have anything else you want to mention before we just quickly go over the strengths and weaknesses?
Oh, um,
It's not like you have much to say about this one. I think I know where your vote's going at the
yeah, I
end of
think
the
I've
show.
made my feelings clear about My Fair Lady. Again, I will say this though: when I watched it the first time, and I can't remember the last time I'd seen it, but I watched it earlier in the week, and as I said, it kind of left me really cold. Like I didn't really think I cared for it very much. I rewatched it and found myself appreciating it more. There were little things in it that I liked more. I enjoyed the songs a little more, enjoyed the acting a little bit more. But yeah, overall, it just isn't necessarily my cup of tea. See what I did there? I made a tea reference. A lot of tea in these two movies.
So that's one of your weaknesses, is that it's not your cup of tea.
Yes,
Yeah, I think it's written better than Mary Poppins, and I appreciate there's at least one character arc. Um, don't like how it ends. In fact, I like it's like anger inducing, the ending to me.
I agreed.
So don't like that. Um, I kind of like the musical numbers just from like a stage perspective. Maybe there isn't as much dancing or whatever, but I like the spectacle of a lot of
There's
people
no
on a
dancing.
set.
There's less
Right.
dancing. There's no
Yeah.
dancing.
Well, I just
None.
like a lot of people being on screen, I guess. But I appreciate the technical prowess of it as well. So, but also one of the things is that while I do like it being a stage musical sort of feel to it, is it too much like that? I mean, is there too much of a stage musical feel to it to make you lock into it as a film?
Yeah, it does feel very much like both movies were not going for realism, and I understand that. But yeah, My Fair Lady feels almost more staged. What I was thinking, and I didn't look into this, but the sequence at the horse race, um, were those real horses going
I
by?
was wondering,
Because they were
yeah.
really close to those horses, and it seemed like real horses, but I don't know.
So both
When the,
both films have horse races too.
that's right. Good call.
All right. Yeah, let's run down to the head-to-head comparison and we're getting pretty long here, so we'll go through this quickly.
Not as long as either of these movies, but anyway, go ahead.
We might break your rule of not talking about a film in a longer amount of time than it takes to watch it. So, but I guess if collectively we're never going to break that rule now because we're watching 2 movies every week. Okay, story effectiveness in the head-to-head comparison. What do you think?
Oh man. I know that Mary Poppins isn't necessarily the greatest story, but again, I think that the ending of My Fair Lady kind of pulls the rug out from under it. So story effectiveness to me goes to Mary Poppins because it ends in a way that resolves the story at the beginning in a satisfying way.
Okay. See, to me, I think I hate that ending, but I feel like at least there is a story to it that's a little more character developed, and that's what I'm interested in. That feels like a narrative, whereas Mary Poppins just feels like spectacle and kind of going from one thing to the next. So even though I don't agree with the story in My Fair Lady, I'm going to vote that direction on it. Okay, characters. What do you think about the characters?
Well, as we've established, I find Eliza Doolittle annoying for the first 30 minutes, and
Yeah.
I find Henry Higgins to be insufferable the entire movie. So, in terms of characters, I'm going Mary Poppins all day. I mean, Mary Poppins and Bert are 100 times better than anybody in My Fair Lady. Because again, just that whole world of like snooty English people judging everyone, I hate that stuff. I really do. So, it's Mary Poppins all day in terms of character.
I think you might have swayed me on this because I was thinking about My Fair Lady in the sense of characters having movement and at least Eliza Doolittle sort of growing, which you don't see a lot of in Mary Poppins necessarily. But as characters on a page, I think Mary Poppins has far more interesting people populating it. So yeah, I'm going to agree with you on that. I think Mary Poppins has the better characters.
Right. I'll take a chimney sweep over a duchess any day of the week.
Absolutely. Tone and consistency. Now this isn't feels like a pretty clear one.
Yeah, we're going tone consistency. You got to give the nod to My Fair Lady for that one. I mean, I can't argue with that.
All right. And we talked about this a little bit, but cultural staying power and iconic scenes.
I think in terms of people that love movies, I mean, My Fair Lady does get a little more love than the general public. I think, and just understand that. Well, I mean, this is the difference between a studio like Warner Brothers versus a studio like Disney, which really appreciates its history and its movies. That My Fair Lady had to be restored. I don't know, like maybe 20 years ago, because the negative had been almost just completely degraded and destroyed. Because apparently Warner Brothers didn't take care of the stuff that was in their vault.
So they don't really care about it, is what you're saying.
Yeah, so I mean, whereas Walt Disney, I mean, they would always do re-releases. I mean, they very much care for the movies in their vault. They had a whole thing called the vault. I mean, we remember this from when we were kids. They're like, it's coming out of the vault for only a year,
Yeah.
and they would release it, and then they put it back, and it was a whole thing. But
That's
they
called
very much,
supply and demand.
right?
Yeah.
They very much understood the value of what they had, and they would parse it out in small ways. But My Fair Lady was sitting on a shelf and degrading, and Martin Scorsese has been very much involved in trying to make sure the old movies get restored. And he was involved in this one as well. But there was a whole digital restoration process to bring it back to life. So I just wanted to mention that. So in terms of staying power, My Fair Lady had a resurgence because there was the beautiful restoration of it. But overall, I mean, Mary Poppins is just a part of the culture in a way that My Fair Lady is not anymore. Pygmalion very much is still part of the culture, the story itself, but My Fair Lady on its own doesn't have the same staying power, I think.
I think it's interesting that Disney is behind Pretty Woman, so they've got to make their own version of My
Yeah,
Fair Lady in their end eventually.
that's a good
Uh,
call.
yeah, I mean, it's a matter of like prestige versus populism. And obviously, you know, My Fair Lady won so many awards and among the cinephiles, it's the thing. But, that percentage of the population is not that big. But you can ask anybody from probably an age range of like, my Uncle Joe at 102 to your kids at like teens and preteens, and they're going to know Mary Poppins. So I think just because of that, and again, it's the Disney marketing machine. They know how to keep this stuff front and center, probably with those vault releases, because what is that other than like, ooh, limited time only deal? It's coming out of the vault, which I don't think they could do as much with streaming. But for a while there, it was like, get this on Blu-ray, get this on DVD while the supplies last, or it's going back into the vault. And I think just
I
as
definitely fell for that. I did buy Mary Poppins on
ooh, look at
DVD
that, a
from the vault
shiny
when it
Mary
came out, like
Poppins.
20 years ago. Yeah,
Wow. See? That's how they do it,
it was going
you
back in the
know?
vault. I had to get it.
Right. So, yeah, I mean, hands down Mary Poppins here. It's actually just quite a testament to Disney's marketing abilities and what Walt Disney's always done as a salesman. Our 5 questions. Which film is more rewatchable? I think we probably
Yeah,
established.
hands down, Mary Poppins.
Yeah,
It's not even a question.
absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I love looking at My Fair Lady, but I do not want to sit through it again. The thing with Mary Poppins and the way that it's really these set pieces makes it perfect for social media culture. It's very clippable, where you could watch one scene, throw that up on TikTok or something. You don't really have that as well in My Fair Lady. So that's a little bit more of a testament to the staying power of Mary Poppins. The thing that actually makes it worse as a film for me is the thing that makes it better for the age we live in. Would you wanna hang out with anyone from these films?
I mean, you obviously know the answer to that question. I would hang out
I'm
with
hanging out with Bert.
Bert all
Yeah.
day.
Yeah. Perhaps at an Arthur Treacher's restaurant. I love Bert. He is just such a joy to watch on screen. Is this a career peak or valley for any of the main players? There's actually a lot to mention here.
I feel like it could be a career peak for George Cukor in some ways. Because again, we've talked about how, I mean, this is the first Academy Award that he won, but it's just, the culmination of years of work coming here. I wouldn't say it's a career peak for Audrey Hepburn just because of the whole thing. Maybe Rex Harrison, because honestly, this is the only thing I know of Rex Harrison in a way. That, and
It's
he's
his
not a
only
good person,
Oscar.
but this is really it
Yeah.
for so maybe him. Um, it's hard to say for Mary Poppins because again, it was Julie Andrews' first movie, and Dick Van Dyke is Dick Van Dyke. He was on quite a heater here, but I mean, this was only the beginning of 50 years of work that he ends up doing. So I don't know. I mean,
Yeah, I think for Stevenson as a director, because this really feels like it lifts him up into another echelon and he kind of gets all that Disney work after this. I mean, I know he had done a few things before it, but this really cements him as a go-to guy. And I think that's a big deal. The Sherman Brothers, who won the 2 Oscars, I don't know if they had written
yeah, that's a
any
good call.
music
It
that
very
would be
well
better than this.
could be that. Yeah, for them.
Yeah. But yeah, I think also Rex Harrison and Kukor from My Fair Lady probably, yeah, probably the height. All right. Would one of these films be better if Steven Spielberg directed it?
um,
It's hard to argue with what they are. But that being said, I wouldn't mind seeing him take a swing at Mary Poppins. I think he could put better story into it. And I think technologically, in this day and age, it would be interesting if he remade it to see some of the updates he could do to it. I mean, I know they made it, they remade it, right, with Emily Blunt, but
they
I think
didn't remake it. It
Spielberg
was a
doing it.
continuation.
Okay. Would either film be better if you swap lead actors?
The thought of Rex Harrison playing Bert makes me laugh. But
We take the energy of that film
yeah.
down.
And of course, it's crazy to even think about this because I mean, would it be better if this is literally what they did? They swapped out Julie
Yeah,
Andrews literally
exactly.
for Audrey Hepburn. So I don't know what to say. My Fair Lady possibly would have been better with Julie Andrews. It's certainly possible. And could Audrey Hepburn have played Mary Poppins? Maybe. I don't think that she would have failed at it. It would have been slightly different, but I mean, I don't think there's a reason she couldn't have done it. Oh, actresses, it's almost a tie. There's no.
When we look at the voting online, and please do follow us. We're at Movie Throwdown Pod on all the social media. Vote for our upcoming week's films. And this is where we will tell you how your vote went. Not too many votes this week. No surprise. Only 32. Split right down the middle, 16 apiece. So it's a tie according to the internet. Very interesting.
Wow.
Yeah, that's the My Fair Lady thing is really surprising to me with what we just established as Mary Poppins being such a cultural touchstone that My Fair Lady got the same amount of votes. I think if I left the poll up a little longer, it might have gone differently, but as it stands, that's the way it is. Well, I think we know where we're going with this. Mary Poppins.
We know where I'm going with it.
Yeah, I mean, Mary Poppins is by far the most long lasting of the 2 films, and its story faults aside for me. I think it's probably still the film that I would pick. So I think I'm in agreement with you, and like I said, it was a tie on the internet, so it's really up to us. We vote unanimously for Mary Poppins. Did not
Thank you.
think I would happen as I was watching this. So yeah, interesting to go down the road on
I mean,
these
I'm
because
really glad you said that because
ultimately,
it's borderline. We would have to stop doing this podcast together if you voted against Mary Poppins. I don't have a lot of hard lines in the sand, but that's one of them.
well, I'm glad I I saved us then. Whew. Okay, well that's it for Mary Poppins and My Fair Lady. Mary Poppins comes out on top. Let's talk about next week's episode. We're keeping it musical, but we're moving into a modern realm, kind of, for the most part. These are both films that are made more recently than Mary Poppins and My Fair Lady, though they're set. One of them, at least, is set. What is it, like the 50s? Is that when
60s.
50s or 60s? So we're matching up Sing Street from director John Carney and That Thing You Do from director Tom Hanks. That's very. I did not know he directed that, so I'm interested in that. Happy to have him back on the show because our content about Big is by far the biggest mover on social media. So hopefully we'll get a little Hanks bump when we post some clips next week. These aren't out and out musicals, I don't think, but they're like more like movies with music in them, musical performances in them. And I'm very happy to move on to that from
Probably more so than musicals, which I like. I think these are my favorite kind of movies. Movies that have music in them. Well, all movies have music in them. That's a dumb thing to say, but you know what I mean. Music being performed.
Yeah.
Movies about bands or artists. I really enjoy those kind of movies.
Kind of the only thing John Carney makes, right? I mean,
Exactly.
everything he does is like that. So we might see another matchup from him down the road or something. So yeah, that's where we're going to go next week. Join us on social media and cast your votes for our future episodes. We're at Movie Throwdown Pod on Instagram, Threads, and TikTok. You can also follow us on Letterboxd where we're at Movie Throwdown. And be sure to come back and join us next week for Sing Street versus That Thing You Do. We'll see you then. So long.